We knew that a lot more white people had to stand up because the issue of racism isn't our problem. Racism is a white problem, and white people have to address it.
In 1978, young brown men were being arrested. With unemployment rising and the economy faltering, blame drifted through the streets of Auckland and settled on Pacific migrants who had responded to New Zealand's request for unskilled labour a decade earlier.
Being a Pacific Island man in the 1970s meant work, pay the rent, and try and survive.
The Dawn Raids. These early morning police raids on suspected overstayers were introduced in 1974. Their main purpose was to find and deport Pacific people whose work permits had expired.
It was an operation which was very explicitly aimed at Pacific people, particularly from Samoa and Tonga. It was overtly racist in its operations, even though in those days hardly anyone talked about racism.
It was life for us. It was normal to be pulled up by police and checked over and demanding to know where we were from, where we were going.
It was a really dark period of New Zealand history and also Pacific history, particularly because Pacific people were invited to come over to New Zealand, and as soon as it didn't suit New Zealand, they were targeted and asked to leave.
One Tuesday night, 17-year-old Niue man Iki Toloa was walking from his work at an Ellerslie plastics factory to his home in Ponsonby when he was stopped by police on Karangahape Road. The officers asked about 3 plastic combs in his pocket.
And they said, "Where'd you get this from?" He said, from work. And they said, "All right, we're going to arrest you now and take you down and put in the cells for the night." And in the morning, he pleaded guilty to theft from his employer.
David Williams read about Iki Toloa's arrest in the Auckland Star the next day and called a fellow activist to discuss response options.
What we were planning was to make a joint press release to complain about it. But then when I put the phone down, I thought, why do a press release? Why don't I do an action this time?
Williams took a University of Auckland pen home with him that day. He called the Auckland Star reporter and told her to be at the police station first thing the next morning.
I presented myself to the police sergeant and said, "Look, I've come to hand myself in for the theft of a piece of property of my employer, and I understand that the maximum penalty for this offence is 12 years imprisonment or something like that, and so therefore it's a very serious offence, and I'm giving you a confession if you'll just take down my confession and see if you can arrest me for that, please." The outcome was that the university refused to consent to my being arrested. It became a front-page story on the Star. It was just a day where this particular event caught people's imagination.
The story caused a public outcry, and Iki Toloa's conviction was vacated. While Williams' attempt to get arrested made front-page news, Toloa's arrest was largely accepted by many Pacific people at the time.
New Zealand media hasn't been very kind to brown people, and as Pasifika people, we don't normally like to ask questions. We like to trust authority.
The Pacific Island parents that came here knew that they were guests in this country. And when you're a guest in someone's house, you don't do upsetting or bad things. You know. So because a lot of the young people at that time were getting picked up, they assumed that we were doing bad stuff.
After the pen incident, Williams returned to his job at the university and Toloa returned to his at the plastics factory. And the police targeting of Pacific men continued.
We knew that a lot more white people had to stand up and be accounted for. So Dave Williams is way ahead of a lot of his brothers and sisters, you know.
The Dawn Raids were discontinued in 1979. As house prices rose and gentrification set in, Pacific communities were pushed from central Auckland to South Auckland. where they remain overrepresented in the justice system today.
There are some really, really difficult parts of our society where Māori and Pacific people are significantly worse off, and in particular the criminal justice system, incarceration rates in prison, and mental health and the lack of treatment for mental health.
There's definitely a very strong police presence in South Auckland and in communities where there are a lot of brown people. Public perception hasn't really changed since the 70s, to be perfectly honest, except racism back then was quite overt. It's far more subtle now, and even little things like ensuring that people who come to the justice system understand their rights, understand what their options are, that's still not readily available, particularly to Pacific people.
I would encourage anyone that has any doubt about whether they might or might not take a political action, err in favour of taking the political action.
You need to speak up, you need to support us, and I'm hoping that you do, because we'll welcome that, we need that.
I would encourage him to do the right thing, follow his heart, his or her heart, and know that the children will be the judge eventually. The children will ask, what did you do?